Fire Emblem Echoes: Shadows of Valentia was a groundbreaking title in the Fire Emblem franchise. At its release, the game was heralded by the fanbase as a brilliant new entry into the series that reimagined and transformed its second game, Fire Emblem Gaiden, from the black sheep of the Fire Emblem family to one of its greatest entries to date. In fact, many even consider it to be the definitive greatest Fire Emblem title due to its amazing art style, storytelling, music, gameplay, improvements, and overall presentation. Ever since its release, Fire Emblem fans have had a question in the back of their mind. Why exactly does the game have two subtitles? Does the word Echoes mean anything in particular? Most fans agree that the Echoes name denotes a sub-series of Fire Emblem remakes, and that more remakes will be coming in the future. In terms of predicting the next Fire Emblem Echoes game, should one be released, I assume that it's most likely to be either a remake of Fire Emblem 6, The Binding Blade, or Fire Emblem 9, Path of Radiance. I'll put a link to my video on that topic up in the card in the top right if you'd like to see my reasoning. However, despite this expectation, I do not believe that either of these games are the most deserving candidate for a remake. Though I would love to see either of them remade with the same love and care given to Gaiden when transformed into Shadows of Valentia, I believe that there is another game that, due to recent trends in the series and its overall age, deserves a total transformation into its Echoes form. It is a game that is both grand in scope and unique in mechanics, different from the core series almost in ways perhaps even more dramatic than Fire Emblem Gaiden was. It's a game with an overarching narrative that's incredibly complex, with gameplay that follows suit. I'm of course talking about the fourth game in the series, Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War, and while I do not necessarily believe it will be the next Fire Emblem remake, I think it would be the game that would benefit the most from the Echoes treatment. If that were to happen, it could easily shape up to be the very best game in the series. My name is Vantage Emblem, and today we're going to be taking a look at what a potential Fire Emblem 4 remake could look like. We're going to analyze the peculiarities and quirks of the original game, and we will compare them with modern trends in the series in an attempt to see what this game, should it ever exist, could look like. So mount up, grab your leg rings, and your warp staff, and let's get started. Part 1. Armies on the field. Genealogy of the Holy War is a game defined by its massive scope. The typical Fire Emblem game has maps that are approximately 24 by 23 tiles, while Genealogy has maps that are almost all 64 by 64 tiles barring the prologue, which is only 64 by 32 tiles, still many times above the average map size. The very clear reason for this choice is the game's scale. While typical Fire Emblem games follow what feels like a small band of heroes fighting together to take down several evil factions, with battles having terrain as small as individual trees and bushes, and maps depicting individual battlefields, castles, and settlements, Fire Emblem 4's terrain is designed to capture the broader landscape of an entire nation. Each of Fire Emblem 4's maps captures the scale, size, and essence of an entire nation. Lining them up gives a close approximation of the game's world maps, with water features in each not being small streams or pools, but instead continent-defining lakes and rivers. Each map has multiple castles and towns to capture and rescue, which, unlike typical Fire Emblem villages, are kept at a consistent scale throughout the entire experience. Due to this scale, each soldier in your army is heavily implied not to be a single warrior, but instead an officer leading a battalion of warriors behind them, with each map taking not a handful of days, but instead depicting a grueling march across miles upon miles of land. It's taxing, realistic, and brilliant. In the most recent game in the Fire Emblem series, Fire Emblem Three Houses, we see the groundwork that could easily come into play when realizing a Genealogy remake. In this entry, each player character is not a mere soldier in an army, but instead a leader, an officer, with generic NPCs forming the battalions that follow them. In an effort to realize the Fire Emblem scale, as it was always intended, each soldier is depicted as a leader of a squad, and those NPC warriors fight alongside them. There are mechanics related to this, with battalions giving differing gambit abilities to each player unit depending on which battalion's equips, etc., etc. Genealogy of the Holy War already attempts to create this sense of scope with its enemy placement, oftentimes having a sort of lead enemy surrounded by a formation of many generics, and with their units placed in blocks or chunks to represent formations. This could further be aided by adding a visual aspect to battles, similar to how it is done with Three Houses, but with a greater focus placed on the aesthetic of the individual armies rather than the mechanics of it. There's no requirement that battalions are equipable and interchangeable, nor that they even have an effect on gameplay. In fact, the game is likely better off if they do not. What's important is that they are there to establish scope. There's a good chance that each unit will simply have battalion units of their own type fighting behind them no matter what, with the units having no significant changes to the original gameplay. This would simply allow the units to better match the scale of the maps, and to make the game more realistic, especially when switching to 3D models, which the original Genealogy of the Holy War did not have for its battle animations. Talking about animations and 3D models and 2D animations, given the scale of the maps, we can presume that there is a good chance that the units on the main map will once again be sprite-based, as with the 3DS entries, despite the fact that the units in Three Houses were done with map models. This is once again to adjust for the increased scale of the game, to have units appear less as giants while standing on the map and more as battalions. Alternatively, each unit could be drawn with their squad around them in 3D, though I think this may add more clutter than necessary and could be harder on the game's engine. In most modern entries to the series, we see the battle map directly tied to a one-to-one more detailed version of the 3D environment for unit-to-unit combat. When combat is initiated, the game's camera zooms from the first environment to the second, with combat taking place precisely where this is on the map. A Genealogy of the Holy War remake might have to modify or wholly abandon this concept to make up for its scale, with individual battle maps reused for entire regions of the map. Perhaps we will get to see large armies charge in and clash behind the heroic leaders on beautifully painted backdrops. Part 2. Castles. Explorable castles, actually. Another key aspect of the maps of Genealogy of the Holy War are the castles. Each map has a handful of castles, and each of them works as a sort of chapter goal and base. Aside from your starting castle, each additional castle in the map must be seized to progress to the second part of the chapter. Now, if you played Fire Emblem Three Houses, you may have an idea where I'm going. In Fire Emblem Three Houses, there is a large, explorable home base area known as Garreg-Mach Monastery. Here, you can complete various activities and take part in various events that are typically reserved for base management in other Fire Emblem titles such as Path of Radiance. This, in itself, is an expansion of the My Castle system from Fire Emblem Fates, where a single home base area houses many important gameplay functions. Unlike Three Houses, however, there will be a variety of areas to explore, as there is no central castle, unlike the monastery in that title. In this way, our exploration may actually bear more of a resemblance to the dungeons and towns from Fire Emblem Echo's Shadows of Valentia. In that title, dungeons had free-roaming exploration, while towns had an expanded menu that details the town layout and allows you to visit different areas of the town just from its town UI. In the original Fire Emblem 4, the home castle for a chapter has expanded functionality over later, capturable castles. In our remake, we could perhaps see this expanded by seeing the home castles as free-roaming ones, like Garreg-Mach Monastery from Three Houses, with the smaller castles as explorable through the town menu, like in Shadows of Valentia. You could access all of the various facilities of different castles this way, including arenas, shops, and storage, through a menu that's much more immersive while still along the lines of the original game's vision, all while still being in accordance with modern Fire Emblem trends. Part 3. Fleshing out the cast and story. Genealogy of the Holy War's cast is theoretically excellent, being perhaps the most fleshed out cast at its time of release. But age and the development of many new characterization techniques in more modern Fire Emblem titles have left it feeling a bit lackluster in our modern lens. This remake could easily fix this. We could see character-based conversations happen in castles. These could be similar to the ones that happened in the Milla Shrines in the Hearts of Dungeons in the previous Echoes title, for our new capturable castles, and they could be like the ones at Garreg-Mach in Three Houses for the free-roaming castles. Perhaps this could even influence the way deployment is handled. In the original title, you deployed each unit individually from the main castle at any time by selecting them. Perhaps now you walk up and speak with them, like for recruitment in Fire Emblem Three Houses. Even if castles aren't expanded in this way, a base conversation system reminiscent of the system in the two Tellius games could be implemented. No matter which style is used, this could be an excellent way to flesh out the cast. Other improvements could include a rework of portraits. Various characters in the original Fire Emblem 4 have bland portraits, with several of them similar or reused from other characters. Much in the same way Fire Emblem 2's portraits got massively improved and overhauled with its Echoes remake, we could see the same thing happen here. Perhaps Hidari, the artist for Shadows of Valentia, will return to oversee the character designs of this game. Perhaps a new artist will take the mantle. Only time will tell. Applying another staple of the modern Fire Emblem franchise, characters will get a chance to be fleshed out in cutscenes and still image story sequences as well, which will allow for major events to be presented better given our modern-day enhanced technology, such as the meeting between Sigurd and Deirdre, or the end of Part 1. These events, though told originally as best as they could be, could have their drama drastically expanded through the use of cutscenes, and could do wonders to flesh out the characters and world. Even scenes as simple as saving a village can be given a slightly expanded story sequence compared to the original, just by updating it into a modern style. The flow of time, as implied in the original game, can be better shown through these cutscenes, making it abundantly clear exactly how much time has or hasn't passed between events. Once again, adding to the scope and scale of this game. Supports have become a recent staple in Fire Emblem as well, and this system has its early origins in the original Fire Emblem 4. It's to be expected that they will return in this game, and they can be a great tool to massively expand upon the relationships between these characters. These supports can be fully voiced, as could the whole game, like the previous few games in the series, and this would add uniqueness to each of the characters in your army. Reading lines written differently for different characters is one thing, but hearing it fully voice acted is another. Part 4. Marriages and Romance. Oh my. Alongside supports, we have to talk about marriage. In modern Fire Emblem titles, marriage has been an incredibly important and fundamental mechanic, tied into the support system, with a new S tier representing marriage of some sort. This has been present in all new mainline Fire Emblem releases since Awakening, with the exception of the last remake. This seems like reason enough for marriage to not be included in a vacuum, but it's quite the opposite. Shadows of Valentia lacked in marriages and support to keep it more faithful to the original game, but made up for it in other ways, such as added memory prisms. The marriage system of Fire Emblem, however, originated in Fire Emblem 4, so it would be an incomplete remake without it, especially given how core it is to the gameplay. The clunky marriage system of the original Fire Emblem 4 could easily be attached to a support system, like how it is handled in modern Fire Emblem, especially because it would be an easy way to pair characters and understand relationships. Various on-field conversations, such as the ones that yield items, could be turned into supports, or base conversations, or perhaps left outside of the support conversations entirely, maybe just giving slight support points when used, and other support conversations would be written to fully flesh out the cast and fill the void. Having marriages tied to S supports makes planning out optimal pairings simpler, and it serves as yet another way to flesh out the cast. Indeed, the characters that began paired could have their S supports predetermined, much as how Pent and Louise began with an A support in Fire Emblem 7, the highest support value in that game. Perhaps memory prisms can return, and they can show some sort of history between these characters in flashbacks. This works even for platonic supports, or in lieu of supports to connect them to the main characters, and to connect main characters and non-playable characters from their past. For example, Sigurd, who has his marriage predetermined but not initialized at the start of the game, he could just reach an A support with other characters at max, and when meeting his partner, he could achieve an S support after perhaps a cutscene showing the passage of their time together. Or several characters who went to an academy together before the game, they could be shown through a memory prism at this academy. Part 5. The Second Generation. Fire Emblem Awakening and Fire Emblem Fates popularized the idea of the child unit. In those games, a marriage led to the birth of a child unit, and these units could be recruited through a paralog side chapter and incorporated into the main army. S supports would unlock a child unit chapter, and those chapters would have an opportunity to recruit that unit, either through clearing the map or completing a side objective, such as talking to the character. This mechanic, however, has been absent from the series after those two games, taking into account the fact that it would not fit well into the narratives of the following two games. The child unit mechanic, however, remains very popular, and it could easily make a return in a future entry of the series. In the case of a remake of Genealogy of the Holy War, it would need to return. The entire premise of the game is built upon the child unit mechanic, which is deeply ingrained into its story and gameplay systems. Much like how Awakening and Fates handles its child unit characters, the child units in our potential remake could inherit physical traits from both their parents, while also keeping their stat changes and inheritance. Unlike Awakening and Fates, however, parent units that aren't paired up and do not produce offspring do not leave a blank spot in the roster. Instead, the slot is filled up with similar, yet different replacement units. This remake yields an opportunity for these replacement characters to actually be fully fleshed out, as much as their main Generation 2 roster. This can actually provide replay value, as they each have their own supports, personalities, goals, and so forth, content that you would never access in a run with all pair-ups. In a weird way, this creates a system similar to the recruitment system of Three Houses, but instead of having to impress characters from other classes into joining your class, the characters you attain are organically selected based on who you do or do not pair up, making many characters mutually exclusive to each other and creating interesting party combinations. There will be fan favorites that result from pair-ups and fan favorites that result from the lack of pair-ups. In many ways, this could be an elegant system that adds so much replay value and just so much intrinsic value to the game as a whole. It also adds to the permadeath, as life and death determine what child units would be born and what replacement units would be born. Part 6. Purity of Form and Function. Fire Emblem Three Houses was a dramatic departure for the series, and in many ways this was a very good thing. Three Houses united a fractured community of fans and is a beloved entry in an already storied series, being the best-selling Fire Emblem game to date. Three Houses is heavily influenced by Genealogy, not only through its Academy premise, which the devs claim to be heavily inspired by the backstory of Genealogy of the Holy War, but also through its scope, time skip, and scale. However, this remake of Fire Emblem 4 would be a chance to slightly return to Fire Emblem form, established by the 3DS entries in the series. Things like map sprites transitioning into 3D battle animations, child units returning, marriage between units, all of these will play a role. The game also obviously harkens back to the classic Super Famicom Fire Emblem titles by simply being a remake of a Super Famicom title, but is also updated to modern standards, with full voice acting, cutscenes, quality of life like casual mode and turn wheel / divine pulse, an updated and fleshed out story, and many, many, many more elements and features. Part 8. Putting it all together. Putting it all together, this game would be particularly brilliant were it to exist. What we presented is perhaps a very scope-creepy version of a potential remake, and yet somehow also rooted in the reality of what a game like this has the potential to look like. The original Genealogy of the Holy War, as is, has always been defined by its incredible scope compared to the rest of the series. Even today, it is a giant, continent-scaling conflict where each individual chapter can change the fate of a nation, where great generals lead large armies into battle, where heroes and villains live and die by the sword and fire. The plot of the original game is excellent as is, and it tells a sweeping, operatic saga of kings, knights, and generals, of betrayal, of love, of darkness and light, of lies, deceit, murder, war, family, bonds, and hope. Remade for a modern age, this game could very easily be not just one of the very best titles in the Fire Emblem series, not just one of the best turn-based strategy games of all time, but one of the very best games of all time. It is a literal treasure trove, a wealth of content, and all that needs to happen is for this game to be acted on, believed in, brought to the West, modernized, and championed. And that is why Fire Emblem 4 Genealogy of the Holy War is the definitive greatest candidate for a remake in the Fire Emblem series. It deserves to be the next Echoes title, above all else. And hey, it's next in line sequentially, given that Fire Emblem 1, 2, and 3 have already been remade at least once. I guess there's hope that we'll see Fire Emblem 4, years later after its original release, being enjoyed by a whole new generation of fans. When it comes down to it, isn't that what Fire Emblem 4, Genealogy of the Holy War, is and always has been about? I'll leave you to ponder that question. But for now, I'll say my goodbye. My name is Vantage Emblem, and I thank you all for listening to this video. I hope that you, one day, will be playing a remake of this wonderful title in your own hands, and one day it will be brought to the West to be enjoyed by many, many more fans. And if you have not played Fire Emblem 4 Genealogy of the Holy War and you've made it this far, if a remake is ever announced, try not to be spoiled. I swear, the twists and turns of this story are brilliant. Anyway, I'll stop rambling and end things here. My name is Vantage Emblem, and I wish you all have a very wonderful day. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.